Welcome to CD Club. Today I will have a special guest from the United States, President of Czech and Slovak National Museum and Library in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Madam Celia Rokusek. Welcome, Cecilia, to our program.
Thank you so much, Pavol. Pleased to be here.
Before we will dive in and talk about your institution, its program, importance both for Czech and Slovak republics, but also for Americans, personal question, how long have you been president? And since I know that you are our honorary consul in Florida, what brought you to this special institution?
Well, actually, it's kind of an interesting question, Pavol, because I'm an academic. I've been an academic for 30 years, and in 2018, I received a call from a search firm that said, you've been nominated for the president and CEO of the National Czech and Slovak Museum and Library. And I said, no, I'm very happy. I'm president of a university in Florida, Larkin University. Thank you very much. They called 2 more times. So finally, the 3rd time, I said, why do you keep calling? They said, well, because the letters, we've gotten several letters. They wanted someone who was Czech and Slovak, and they wanted someone who knew the culture, and please at least apply. So I put my name in the hat, and thus 5 years later, I have now been serving as president and CEO.
5 years of this exercise, but parallel to that, you still continue to be our honorary
I
consul.
am pleased and honored to continue to be our honorary consul in Florida, and so I fly back and forth, and we have our home in Florida, and so it works out very well.
I know, since foreign policy diplomacy is my bread and butter, that you were recognized within 1 year both by Czech foreign minister and recently also by Slovak foreign minister, decoration awards for your service. But now, since you are president of this special institution in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, do you feel that you are more sort of diplomat, honorary consul, or more president of museum library?
That's a great question, Pavol. I would answer it by saying both. I think that together they complement each other because I'm able to really transfer the knowledge that I have as honorary consul to my position as president and CEO. And both countries truly mean so much to me, the Czech Republic and Slovak republics. And we are best friends, the Czechs and Slovaks. So I think by being in the diplomatic honorary council post, I'm able to reach a larger group of people and plus connect to more people. And so I think it's a benefit, and I would say they're equal.
I'm very glad that it worked, and I can have you on our program. What brought you this time to Bratislava?
Well, you know, I always love to come to Bratislava, and this time I was invited to be the keynote speaker at the Živý Award Ceremony Conference. And this is a very special conference. It's a week-long conference held here at our National Museum here in Bratislava, as well as our Castle Museum. And it brings together all of the cultural museums that are Slavic in origin. So where there are, there are right now 12, there are 14 Slavic nations, but there are 12 Slavic nations represented at this conference. And so we are really looking at how we can preserve and transmit our culture for future generations. So the mission of these museums is really incredible from all of the Slavic nations. 12 are represented, as I said. And what we're really focusing on is what new ways can we preserve our culture and continue to preserve it for future generations. So it was amazing to see the variety of museums as well as the variety of techniques that people are using to adapt to a new world society.
Yeah. So you were presenting your National Czech and Slovak Museum and Library to the auditorium. So let's tell us a few words about what is the mission and main programs of your institution these days?
Well, the focus of my presentation, as you said, was to tell them a little bit about the museum that we have, because we're the only National Czech and Slovak Museum and Library in North America. And we were proclaimed by the U.S. Congress in 1992. And then in 1995, we built this beautiful structure, and it was dedicated by our 3 presidents, President Clinton of the United States, President Havel of the Czech Republic, and President Kovács of Slovakia. And what was so unique about that is that 3 sitting presidents came to America to dedicate this new museum. And so my lecture to the group at the Živa Award Conference was Museums of the 21st Century. And I spoke about how we are trying to preserve the past, celebrate the present, and create the future with innovation. Our mission at the museum right now is to create an experience for people of all ages and to focus on the immigration story, freedom, and democracy. Because we really are a museum that talks about Czechs and Slovaks coming to America. It's the American story of immigration. And one of the big messages I tried to get across at this conference was that museums today are really centers for the preservation of freedom and democracy. We should be available to the community. We should be open to the community. We should have programs. We should have forums. We should have discussions. And that was the message that I tried to think, that I transmitted to our audience. And you know, Pavol, the interesting thing about the history of museums is that historically, museums were for the very wealthy, and they were very intellectually based. Now we want to take that and bring that museum culture to everyone, and we want to focus on, especially in cultural museums, what is your culture? Can you learn from the Czechs and Slovaks? And so our museum in Iowa is a museum for all cultures. We're a Czech and Slovak museum. We tell the Czech and Slovak history and stories, and we talk about immigration and freedom, but we want everybody to learn from their own culture from ours.
I see. Who are your main partners, since this conference was organized mainly by Slovak National Museum? Besides this institution, which are your partners? And also if you could mention few types of programs, interactions, joint ventures, what you have with Slovak institutions.
Oh, absolutely. We have really adopted in the last 5 years in our museum and library the importance of transatlantic partnerships, and that was one of the issues as we look to the future. We have to have these if we're going to preserve our culture and create a forum for the future. And so certainly, as you mentioned, the National Museum here, we work very closely with the National Museum in Prague, but then we've also developed academic partnerships. So we work with Trnava University, we work with Palacký University, we work for Comenius University, and so we're really expanding to work with, and we're looking to even more develop more partners so that we can bring those collaborative programs, such as 2 years ago we did a phenomenal exhibit at the National Museum from Bratislava, the National Museum, called Treasures of Slovakia. And this was the first time that we had such an exhibit like that in the United States. And it was incredible. We had it for 6 months, developed here. In 2 years, we're going to have one on Štěfánik. We're going a new one that's being developed here at the National Museum on Štěfánik. We've also gotten one on Slovakia, Good Idea. We talk about sort of all the new things in Slovakia. So we really try to focus and work closely with, and in turn, we will make available exhibits that we have from our museum to the National Museum here and its affiliate sites that they have as well.
And how do you cooperate with Czech and Slovak embassies in Washington? Are embassies and consulate generals and so on part of your program? Do you engage them? Could you share some?
Oh, very, 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 very closely. We work with both the embassies, both the ambassadors, both of their staffs, and that's a really nice intersection too with your earlier question about being a Slovak Honorary Council and knowing the honorary councils from both the Czech Republic and Slovakia. We're able to integrate them. Our consul generals, we work with them very closely from New York, and then the Czechs have one in Chicago, and they have one in LA. The Slovaks have one in New York, consul general, and then of course the 2 ambassadors. They are our right and left hand, I would say. We try to involve them in things we do. Certainly the ambassadors have all been great. They come to Iowa, and people often say, why is the National Czech and Slovak Museum and Library in Iowa? The easy response is that it's a central part of the United States. It's a heartland. And immigrants came there because of the farming, because of the jobs in the meat packing industry, because of the jobs in the factories, so they came there. Most of the Slovaks came to Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and most of the Czechs came to the Midwest, including Nebraska, and then they went down to Texas. They came through Galveston. But actually, the fact is that we did also get quite a few Slovaks. We don't often think about it. And they came to Iowa in 1914. The local newspaper in Cedar Rapids, Iowa said that Cedar Rapids is the mecca for Czechs coming to America. They used the word Bohemians at that time because we had an opera, we had a civic literary society, we had a library. So people came there because, and they quote said, it's better than Chicago, Cleveland, or New York. So that was wonderful. So Iowa was a real central point. Antonín Dvořák, for example, came to Iowa because it reminded him of his homeland, the landscape. So we really do work very closely, and we invite people to come. And we're not in New York, we're not in Chicago, we're only 3.5 hours away from Chicago, but we're the center of America.
Few words about cooperation between museum, library, and other organizations, fraternal organizations, or newly created organizations by people who emigrated or are studying, working in the United States.
Very good question again, Pavol. One of the things we're really trying to do through the museum, because we feel like we're the epicenter, it's very easy for immigrants now and even in the past to lose their identity, to lose their, and once you lose your cultural identity and your language, you lose your future. And so we are trying to take all of these groups that are really trying to preserve that culture. One of them is the fraternals, and we have many fraternals, especially Slovak fraternals in the United States, as well as some Czech, and we have reached out to all of them to come to our museum, to use our publications. We have some very good publications, to use our library, and we're trying to connect to all the fraternals throughout the United States. We're trying to also connect to the communities. There's a Slovak Arkansas. There's a Wilbur, Nebraska, that is the largest Czech celebration in the country. There's one in 3 or 4 of them in Texas. So we're trying to bring these together, and through a website, we're getting a new website development, bring these so people can identify and work together. Genealogy is very big, so we're working with genealogy societies, genealogy groups, to bring them together. And we're also working with what I would call even some of the religious institutions, the churches. Many of our immigrants came because of religious freedoms that they had in America. And so we're working with some of the Czech and Slovak churches. And our whole focus is to bring, to be an epicenter, to bring people together so that we can help each other and preserve that culture and have a strong identity in the United States.
Nowadays there are newer groups like Friends of Slovakia, Slovak professionals, because there are many successful Slovaks and Czechs from working in various walks of life. Where do you see some key challenges now of maintaining dialogue, cooperation between Czech Republic, Slovak Republic, and the United States? And what are some of the programs which your institution is trying to build around this new dynamism of post-Velvet Revolution emigration to the United States?
Well, you know, we're just celebrating now 30 years of 2 independent countries, and 2 organizations in the United States that have been instrumental with us is Friends of Slovakia and American Friends of the Czech Republic. And those are very large groups that work in the sort of political arena, as well as looking and monitoring what's going on in each of our countries. And we have tried to work with them on shared webinars, shared podcasts, and also shared dissemination of information. So, for example, if they have a program, we try to disseminate it on our website, and even though people may not travel to Washington, they may have access to it post on a recording. So we're trying, and I think what I see in the future, that these groups are going to have to work together to maximize the impact, because many times we have an attendance of 20, 30, 40 people, and the content is so important, especially to those Americans with those Slovak roots, the Czech roots. And I think that, you know, the young professional groups out of New York, with especially the Slovak group, are doing a great job, but we also have to reach out to those in Florida, to those in California, to those in Texas. There are a lot of them in Texas. And the museum is working on developing a live stream TV station that we hope to implement next year. And we hope that that will bring these groups together, at least that they will have a center place, that we don't want to discourage people from doing their webinars, but we want to maximize the dissemination.
I know that next year you will celebrate 50th anniversary of your special institution, which is developing ties between US, Czech Republic, and Slovakia. And as you mentioned, and here I must disclose, I was there when three presidents, Clinton, Havel, Kovács, were opening new building of the institution, so I have personal feel for institution and visited several times museum, library. Could you disclose few plans for celebrating these important milestones in history of museum library?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. We're going to start in January of 2024, having monthly programs, and then in May will be a huge culmination in June, first week, I'm sorry, the first week in May. We're going to have an economic forum in which we're going to invite businesses, leaders, our sort of ambassadors, of course, and legislative people from the United States that are involved in trade. And we're having a 2-day economic forum the first week of May. Then the first Saturday of May, we're going to have a gala, and we're hoping to invite three presidents back, three new presidents, different presidents that were Clinton, certainly President Clinton has in the past been very open to the idea that he may come. So, and we would have maybe perhaps our Czech president and our Slovak president, and then we also are going to have in May an ethnic festival. We're calling it Hobby Days with our Czech community. And then throughout the summer, we're going to implement something very new, week-long workshops on Czech heritage. So one of them will be on how to make a kroy, one of them will be Moravian folk art painting, one will be ethnic dance, and one of them is culture and heritage. So these week-long forums that people can actually come to Cedar Rapids, immerse themselves in the culture, and learn and have some painting and have a kroy, because I think one of the things that people who are American Czechs or American Slovaks really are hungry for are connecting back to their roots. I think with the ancestry testing that everyone's doing, they want to have a better feel. So this summer of our 50th anniversary, we're going to kick off these 4 week-long workshops. Then in September and October, we're going to be celebrating music, Czech and Slovak music, because it's the Czech year of music, but we're going to celebrate Czech and Slovak music. So we're going to have some, we're going to do Rizalka, and we're going to have several concerts. We're going to have a major light show on our building, but the sort of the tip of the top of the cake, if we could say, the ornament on the cake will be hopefully the opening of our astronomical Orloj clock. We're hoping that in October of 2024 we will be able to unveil. We are going to be, we have the tower, we're going to be building a astronomical Prague style Orloj clock. We're using some engineers from Prague, and our statues will be built in Slovakia, so it truly will be a Czech and Slovak venture, and that will be the big sort of unveiling. And then throughout the year we're going to have special exhibits. We're doing a Muka exhibit, and then we are doing an exhibit of 50 years of influence and history in Cedar Rapids, what it meant about immigration, or what the people brought, the struggles they had, and that will be a major exhibit.
Excellent. So I think that you have a lot in front of you, and let me conclude thanking you that you accepted during your visit to Bratislava while you are attending this special conference of Slavic museums, where you had chance to establish new links and present not only your institutions but also many creative ideas, how in contemporary times, what kind of roles can museums and libraries play. They are far beyond traditional functions, what they did. And I wish you and the whole your team for upcoming 50th anniversary big success of all your activities, and I hope that I will see you before that, either here, because you are coming from time to Slovakia, or I may stop by at Cedar Rapids.
Thank you very much, Pavol.